The cold, dirty water hit me like a slap across the face. Time seemed to freeze as I stood there on the London sidewalk, dripping with muddy water, my grocery bag soaked through, watching my ex-husband's Bentley slow to a stop. The window rolled down, and there he was, James Deckard, grinning at me like he'd just won something. The same smug smile I'd endured for 5 miserable years of marriage. "Oh my God, Olivia, is that you?" His voice dripped with mock surprise and genuine delight at my humiliation. I wiped the filthy water from my eyes, my hands trembling with rage and shock. "James," was all I could manage, my voice barely audible over the rain and passing traffic. He laughed, glancing at the young blonde in his passenger seat who giggled behind designer sunglasses. Still shopping at Tesco. Still living that budget life. Some things never change. What he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly imagine, was how completely everything had changed. The soaked woman he was mocking wasn't just Olivia Taylor, the primary school teacher he'd belittled throughout our marriage. I was now Olivia Calloway, wife of the Prime Minister's only son. Hello beautiful people, and welcome to my story. I'm wondering where you're watching from today? Have you subscribed to this channel yet? If not, I'd be so grateful if you took a second to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. You see, karma doesn't always come instantly. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it gathers strength. And sometimes, when you least expect it, it kicks down your door on national television. My ex-husband just splashed me with mud from head to toe, laughing as he drove away in his luxury car. He had no idea I now belonged to the family that controlled his entire business empire. He had no clue that in 24 hours, he would be begging for forgiveness with the whole country watching. How does a billionaire who has everything lose it all with one puddle of dirty water? That's what I'm about to tell you. I never wanted to be wealthy. That's what James never understood about me. When we first met at university, I was studying education with dreams of inspiring young minds. James was in business, already talking about the empire he would build. I found his ambition charming then, the way his eyes would light up when describing his future developments, how he'd transform London's skyline. "You're different," he told me on our 3rd date. "All the other girls care about is what I can buy them. You actually listen." That's the James the first fell in love with, the dreamer with plans bigger than himself. Not the man who would later mock my chosen profession, my modest salary, my simple pleasures. We married young. I was 23, teaching at my first school in East London. James had just secured funding for his first major project, converting an abandoned factory into luxury apartments. I supported him through sleepless nights, calmed his fears, celebrated his victories. I believed in him. Then the money came. Not gradually, but in a flood. By our 2nd anniversary, James was worth 8 figures. By our 3rd, 9. Success changed him in ways I couldn't have imagined. "Olivia, you don't need to work anymore," he said, examining my weathered teacher's tote bag with disdain. "It's embarrassing having a wife who makes less than my executive assistant." "My job isn't about money," I explained for the 100th time. "I love teaching. Those children need me." He scoffed. "Let someone else's wife teach them. My wife should be planning charity galas and sitting on boards." The arguments grew more frequent. At social events, he'd introduce me with a hand on my lower back, squeezing just a little too tight. "This is my wife, Olivia. She insists on teaching underprivileged children." So noble, right? The condescension was unmistakable. 5 years in, I barely recognized myself. I'd become quieter, smaller somehow. The confident teacher who once commanded a classroom of 30 children now second-guessed every decision. Was my dress expensive enough for dinner? Would my conversation bore his business associates? Should I just stay silent? The final straw came during a dinner party at our Kensington home. I overheard James in his study with his business partner. "Why do you stay with her?" his partner asked. "She doesn't exactly fit your lifestyle." James laughed, that same laugh I'd hear from his Bentley months later. "She's comfortable. Uncomplicated. Besides, it's amusing watching her try to fit in with our crowd. Like a charity project I keep at home." I filed for divorce the next day. Keep the money, I told our lawyers. I just want out. James was stunned. He'd expected me to fight for half his fortune, for the houses, the cars, the investments. When I asked only for what I'd brought into the marriage, his confusion turned to suspicion. What's your angle? He demanded during our final meeting. No angle. I just want my freedom back. I signed the papers and walked out without looking back. I moved into a small flat in Notting Hill, nothing fancy, but it had character with its creaky floors and bay windows. I returned to teaching full-time at a local primary school. My salary covered my modest needs. For the first time in years, I could breathe. Then came the charity gala that changed everything. The Alexander Powell Foundation for Education had invited teachers from across London to a fundraiser. I almost didn't go. The thought of mingling with wealthy donors brought back too many painful memories. But my headmistress insisted. They need to hear from real teachers, she said. Go remind those rich people what education actually looks like. That's where I met him, William Calloway. Tall, with kind eyes and an actual interest in what I had to say about education reform. No designer watch, no name-dropping, just thoughtful questions about my classroom experiences. Your passion for teaching is inspiring, he said after we'd talked for nearly an hour. Most people at these events are just here for the tax write-off. I laughed. And what's your excuse for being here? Family obligation, he admitted with a sheepish smile. But meeting you has made it the first one of these I've actually enjoyed. We exchanged numbers. He called the next day to ask me to dinner. 3 dates in, I was falling for him. He was everything James wasn't, attentive, humble, genuinely interested in my world. It wasn't until our 6th date that he dropped the bombshell. There's something I should probably tell you, William said, looking uncharacteristically nervous as we walked along the Thames. About my family. I braced myself. Secret wife? Criminal past? Trust fund baby? My father is Edward Calloway, he said simply. The name hung in the air between us. Edward Calloway, Britain's Prime Minister for the past 4 years. One of the most powerful men in the country. The Prime Minister is your father, I repeated, my mind racing. You're that William Calloway. He nodded, watching me carefully. Does that change things between us? I thought about it. About the press intrusion, the security concerns, the political spotlight. About meeting the Prime Minister and his wife. About whether I could handle another relationship where status mattered so much. It depends, I said finally. Are you going to be weird about my job? His face broke into a relieved smile. I love that you're a teacher. It's real, meaningful work. 6 months later, he proposed. 3 months after that, we married in a private ceremony at his family's country estate. The press was kept at bay, though news of the Prime Minister's son marrying a schoolteacher made the Sunday papers. I became Olivia Calloway, the teacher who married into political royalty. But I insisted on keeping my job, my flat, my normal life as much as possible. Security details followed at a discreet distance. I declined the driver William's father offered, preferring to walk or take the tube. Which is how I found myself walking home from Tesco that rainy Tuesday afternoon, carrying grocery bags, dressed in jeans and a raincoat, when James Deckard's Bentley came roaring toward that puddle. What happened next would change both our lives forever. That Tuesday afternoon started so ordinarily. Rain drizzled from London's perpetually grey sky as I finished my teaching day. My year for students had been particularly wonderful. We'd been learning about the solar system, and their eyes had lit up when I brought out the model planets. These were the moments I lived for, the reasons I'd fought to keep my teaching career despite my new status. Have a lovely evening, Mrs. Calloway, called my teaching assistant as I left. You too, Sarah. See you tomorrow. I decided to pick up ingredients for William's favourite pasta dish. It was our 6-month wedding anniversary, and while we had reservations at a fancy restaurant the following weekend, at his parents' insistence, I wanted tonight to be just us. Simple. Real. The security detail that followed me everywhere these days waited outside Tesco as I shopped. I'd gotten used to their presence, though I still found it strange. Just another adjustment to life as a Calloway. As I left the store, the rain intensified. My security guards offered to drive me the short distance home, but I declined. "It's just rain," I insisted. "I'll be fine." I was crossing at a pedestrian crossing when I heard the engine reverend. I turned to see a sleek black Bentley speeding toward me. Something about the aggressive way it accelerated made my stomach clench with instinctive fear. Time slowed as I registered what was happening. The car was aiming directly for the massive puddle beside me, a puddle that had collected at the dip in the road, now swollen with rainwater and street grime. I barely had time to gasp before the Bentley hit the water at full speed. A wave of filthy brown liquid exploded over me like a tsunami. The cold shock of it knocked the breath from my lungs. In an instant, I was drenched from head to toe, hair plastered to my face, clothes soaked through, groceries ruined as my paper bags disintegrated in my arms. For a moment, I stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Water dripped from my chin. My white blouse had turned a sickly brown. I could taste grit between my teeth. The Bentley, which had slowed after hitting the puddle, now stopped completely. The tinted window rolled down with a soft electronic purr. "Oh my God, Olivia, is that you?" That voice. I knew it instantly, even before I wiped the muddy water from my eyes to see James leaning out of his car window, that familiar look of amused superiority on his face. "James," I said, my voice thick with humiliation and rage. His eyes raked over me, taking in my ruined clothes, the sodden grocery bags clutched in my trembling hands. Still shopping at Tesco. Still living that budget life. Some things never change. The woman beside him, a platinum blonde, maybe 25, laughed behind oversized Gucci sunglasses. "James, you're terrible," she said, not sounding disapproving at all. "I know," James replied proudly. He revved his engine. "See you around, Olivia." Or maybe not. "You're not exactly in my circles anymore." The Bentley sped away, leaving me standing there dripping with filthy water, utterly humiliated. People on the street stared. A teenager pointed his phone at me, filming, I realized with fresh horror. My security detail rushed over, jackets already off to offer me cover. "Mrs. Calloway, are you all right?" asked Robert, the head of my security team. I wasn't all right. I was shaking, with cold, with shock, with a rage so pure it frightened me. But I nodded anyway. "Let's get you home," he said gently. "No," I found myself saying. "Call William." Robert hesitated for only a second before nodding. "Of course." 20 minutes later, a sleek government vehicle pulled up. William jumped out before it had fully stopped, his face transforming when he saw me standing there covered in mud and street filth. The concern in his eyes nearly broke me. "Liv," he said, using his private nickname for me. "What happened?" I told him everything as he wrapped his coat around my shoulders and ushered me into the car. With each detail, his expression darkened. William was typically so composed, so measured, a diplomat son through and through. But now I watched something cold and dangerous settle in his eyes. "That was James Deckard?" "Your ex-husband?" he asked, his voice unnaturally calm. I nodded. William turned to his security team. "I want his information. Everything. Now." "William, it's okay," I said, suddenly alarmed by the intensity in his voice. "It's humiliating, but it's not." "It's not okay," he interrupted, taking my muddy hands in his. "What he did was assault. And it was filmed." That's when I noticed Robert showing something on his phone to William's security chief. The video. It had already started circulating. By the time we reached our flat, William had made 3 phone calls, speaking in the clipped, coded language he used for official business. I showered, washing away the physical evidence of my humiliation, but the burning shame remained. When I emerged in clean clothes, William was waiting in our living room, his laptop open. "The video's gone viral," he said quietly. 10 million views already. My stomach dropped. "Oh God. People are outraged on your behalf," he continued. "The comments are calling him disgusting, a bully." I sank onto the couch beside him, suddenly exhausted. "It'll blow over," I said, hoping it was true. William's phone rang. He glanced at the screen. It's my father. I stiffened. The Prime Minister rarely called his son directly unless it was important. William answered, his face giving nothing away as he listened. Yes, that was Olivia. No, she's all right, just shaken. Deckard, yes, her ex-husband. I understand the optics, father. The optics. Of course. This wasn't just about me being splashed with mud anymore. This was about the Prime Minister's daughter-in-law being publicly humiliated. This was political now. After he hung up, William turned to me, his expression grave. The video has been identified. Everyone knows you're my wife now? As if on cue, my phone exploded with notifications. Messages from friends, colleagues, former university classmates. News alerts, billionaire property developer humiliates Prime Minister's daughter-in-law. Then another call came through, the headmistress of my school. Olivia, are you all right? It's all over the news. The parents are calling. The children might see it. The children. My students. My safe haven away from politics and privilege was being invaded. I felt sick. I need to make this go away, I whispered after hanging up. It's too late for that, William said gently. But there's another option. Something in his tone made me look up. What option? We make an example of him. William's voice was soft but resolute. James humiliated you publicly because he thought you were powerless. He didn't know who you are now. Who I am now, I repeated slowly. You mean who I'm married to? Yes. No apology in his voice. My father has suggested a response. I felt a flutter of unease. What kind of response? James Deckard's company, Deckard Developments, holds government contracts worth hundreds of millions of pounds. Contracts that can be reviewed at any time for ethics violations. The implication hung in the air between us. This was no longer about mud on my clothes. This was about a man's livelihood, his empire. That seems excessive, I said carefully. William studied me. Is that what you really think? After how he treated you during your marriage? After what he did today? I remembered James's face as he laughed at me from his Bentley. The years of belittling comments. The way he'd made me feel small. What exactly would happen? I asked. He'll be invited to make a public apology. On television. If he refuses. William shrugged. The government contracts review begins immediately. A choice crystallized before me, let it go and remain forever the woman who gets splashed with mud and does nothing. Or embrace the power I now had access to and teach James a lesson he'd never forget. I thought about my students. What would I tell them when they inevitably asked about the video? That sometimes bad people get away with doing bad things? Okay, I said finally. Let's do it. William nodded, reached for his phone, and made the call that would set everything in motion. I had no idea then how completely James's life was about to unravel, or that mine was about to change just as dramatically. All I knew was that for the first time since that muddy water had hit my face, I felt something other than shame. I felt powerful. Also, please don't forget to subscribe if you're enjoying this journey with me. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw James's smug face as muddy water cascaded over me. I saw the teenager filming with his phone. I saw my students watching the video, their innocent faces confused as they recognized their teacher humiliated on the street. William slept beside me, his breathing steady and calm. How could he sleep? His family had set something irreversible in motion, and I had agreed to it. By morning, the story had exploded. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications, messages from friends I hadn't spoken to in years, journalists requesting interviews. I silenced it and placed it face down on the nightstand. You don't have to go to school today, William said as I got dressed. Everyone would understand. That's exactly why I have to go, I replied, pulling on a simple blouse. I won't hide. He smiled, that same smile that had first attracted me at the charity gala. Pride, admiration, respect. Just be prepared. The media knows where you teach now. Sure enough, when our car approached the school, photographers lined the street. My security detail formed a protective barrier as I walked from the car to the entrance. Flashbulbs exploded around me. Questions were shouted. Mrs. Calloway, what will you say to your ex-husband? Did you know who she was when you splashed her, Mrs. Calloway? Will the Prime Minister make a statement about the incident? I kept my head high, my eyes forward. The headmistress met me at the door, her face a mixture of concern and excitement. The phones haven't stopped ringing, she said, ushering me inside. Parents, reporters, even the Education Minister's office called. I took a deep breath. How are the children? Confused, mostly. The older ones have seen the video. They want to know why someone would do that to their teacher. A valid question. I wasn't sure I had an answer that would satisfy 9-year-olds. When I entered my classroom, 28 little faces turned toward me. I saw worry, curiosity, and, most heartbreakingly, protectiveness in their eyes. Good morning, class, I said as normally as possible. Good morning, Mrs. Calloway, they replied in unison. A little girl named Mia raised her hand immediately. Mrs. Calloway, we saw you on YouTube. A mean man in a fancy car splashed you. Are you okay? The directness of children. No dancing around the subject. Yes, Mia, I'm okay. Sometimes grown-ups don't behave very nicely, just like sometimes children don't. My mum says he's going to be in big trouble, said another child. She says he messed with the wrong lady. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the classroom. I felt a twist of discomfort. Is that who I was now? The wrong lady to mess with? The most important thing, I said carefully, is that we treat others with kindness and respect, even when they don't treat us that way. Now, who remembers what planet comes after Mars? Teaching that day was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I felt the weight of 28 children watching me for signs of distress. I felt the eyes of my colleagues in the staff room, their sympathetic glances and awkward attempts at normal conversation. By lunchtime, I needed air. I slipped out to the small garden behind the school, a quiet space where teachers sometimes ate lunch on sunny days. To my surprise, William was waiting there. What are you doing here? I asked, genuinely startled. I wanted to check on you. He handed me a coffee cup. And tell you what's happening. I took the cup gratefully. What is happening? James Deckard received an official communication from my father's office this morning. He's been requested to appear on BBC News Tonight for a formal apology. Requested. William's mouth twitched. Strongly encouraged. And if he refuses? Then the ethics review of his government contracts begins immediately. I took a long sip of coffee, trying to process this. Has he responded? His lawyers have. They're negotiating terms. Terms for an apology. I couldn't hide my disbelief. This is how these things work, Liv. His people want to control the damage. Our people want maximum exposure. Our people. As if we were two opposing nations. I supposed, in a way, we were. There's something else, William added, his expression turning serious. The palace called. My coffee nearly slipped from my hand. The palace? As in? Yes. The king is concerned about the optics. A member of the Prime Minister's family being publicly disrespected has implications. My head spun. The king was aware of my muddy humiliation? The surreality of my new life hit me afresh. What does that mean for us? We've been invited to a garden party next month. The king wants to show public support for you. I stared at him, speechless. A royal garden party. Because my ex-husband splashed me with mud. This is insane, I whispered. William took my hand. This is your life now, Olivia. Our life. For better or worse. It feels like too much, I admitted. All this over a puddle of dirty water. It's not about the puddle, William said firmly. It's about power and respect. James thought he could humiliate you because he saw you as powerless. He needs to learn that actions have consequences, especially when they're caught on video for the world to see. I wanted to argue, to say this was excessive, but something stopped me. A memory from our marriage, James loudly berating a waitress until she cried, then laughing about it in the car. James cancelling a holiday I'd planned because a better invitation came along. James telling me my dreams were cute but ultimately insignificant. What time is the interview? I asked finally. 8 o'clock. We'll watch it at home. As William left, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it and froze. You think you've won because you married into power? This is just the beginning. You take from me, I take from you. I quickly showed the message to Robert, my security chief. His face darkened as he read it. We'll trace this immediately, Mrs. Calloway. Have you received any other concerning messages? I shook my head, suddenly cold despite the mild spring day. It's probably nothing, I said, trying to convince myself more than him. Just James lashing out. But as I returned to my classroom, the message lingered in my mind. You take from me, I take from you. What did James think I was taking? What could he possibly take from me? The afternoon crawled by. When the final bell rang, I gathered my things quickly, eager to get home before James's televised apology. The photographers had multiplied outside the school. My security team practically carried me to the waiting car. At home, William had ordered dinner from our favorite Italian restaurant. The domesticity of the scene, takeaway containers on our coffee table, the evening news murmuring in the background, felt at odds with the national drama unfolding around us. Are you nervous? William asked as 8 o'clock approached. Should I be? He smiled. No. You've done nothing wrong. James, on the other hand. The BBC News intro music played. The anchor appeared, her expression appropriately serious. Good evening. Tonight we have an exclusive interview with property developer James Deckard, CEO of Deckard Developments. Mr. Deckard has requested this opportunity to address an incident involving Olivia Calloway, daughter-in-law of Prime Minister Edward Calloway. The camera panned to reveal James sitting uncomfortably in the studio. I gasped involuntarily. He looked terrible, face ashen, hair uncharacteristically disheveled, expensive suit somehow ill-fitting. This wasn't the polished, confident James I knew. Mr. Deckard, the interviewer began, would you like to explain what happened yesterday afternoon in Notting Hill? James cleared his throat. I want to publicly apologize to Olivia Calloway for my behavior yesterday. I acted inappropriately and disrespectfully. I'm deeply sorry. His voice sounded hollow, rehearsed. The interview clearly thought so too. Can you describe exactly what you did? She pressed. James's face flushed. I deliberately drove through a puddle to splash her with mud. It was cruel and wrong. And you knew Mrs. Calloway personally. She's my ex-wife. But you didn't know she was now married to the Prime Minister's son. No, I did not, James said stiffly. But that's irrelevant. My behavior was inexcusable regardless of who she is. Good answer, I thought. His PR team had coached him well. Is that so? The interview's voice sharpened. Many viewers have noted that in the video, you seem to take particular pleasure in Mrs. Calloway's distress. One might argue this suggests a personal animosity rather than a random act of cruelty. James shifted uncomfortably. Our divorce was difficult. In what way? I'd prefer not to discuss private matters. The interview smiled thinly. Yet you chose to make your private relationship very public by humiliating Mrs. Calloway on a public street. James had no answer for that. Mr. Deckard, your company holds several significant government contracts. Are you concerned about how this incident might affect those business relationships? A flash of panic crossed James's face before he composed himself. I'm focused on making amends for my personal behavior. My company operates with the highest ethical standards. The interview continued for another excruciating 10 minutes. James grew increasingly defensive as the interview pressed him on his past behavior, his company's practices, even his reputation among former employees. By the time it ended, James looked shell-shocked. William turned off the TV, satisfaction evident in his expression. That went well, he said. It was brutal, I replied, surprised by my conflicting emotions. Part of me felt vindicated seeing James squirm. Another part felt uncomfortable with his public evisceration. "It's only the beginning," William said, reaching for his phone as it buzzed. He read the message, then looked up at me. "The ethics review has officially begun." Father thought James's apology lacked sincerity. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means every government contract Deckard Developments holds is now under scrutiny. Every permit, every approval, every financial detail." My stomach tightened. How bad could it be for him? William's expression was unreadable. "That depends on what they find. And how cooperative James decides to be." Later that night, as William slept beside me, I checked my phone one last time. 3 missed calls from a blocked number. And another text from the unknown sender. "Watch your back, Olivia. You've made an enemy of the wrong person. Everyone has secrets, even your perfect new husband and his powerful family. I wonder what I'll find when I start digging?" I stared at the message, a cold knot of fear forming in my chest. What secrets could James possibly uncover? And more importantly, what would he do with them? I deleted the message and tried to sleep, but my dreams were filled with murky water rising around me, threatening to pull me under. The day after James's disastrous television appearance, I arrived at school to find reporters camped outside again. This time, though, they shouted different questions. "Mrs. Calloway, did you know about the audit before you married William? Was your marriage arranged to target Deckard Developments? Did the Prime Minister orchestrate your relationship with his son?" I froze, bewildered by these accusations. Robert quickly ushered me through the crowd and into the building. The headmistress was waiting, her expression grave. "Perhaps we should talk in my office," she said quietly. My heart pounded as I followed her. The staff we passed avoided eye contact. Something had changed overnight. "Have you seen the morning papers?" she asked once her door was closed. I shook my head. She slid a tabloid across her desk. The headline made my blood run cold. "Revenge marriage? Prime Minister's son wed ex-wife of targeted developer." Beneath was a photo of William and me on our wedding day, alongside a picture of James at some business function. The article claimed our marriage was part of an elaborate plan by the Prime Minister to gain leverage over James, whose company had refused to cooperate with certain government development initiatives. "This is absurd," I said, my hand shaking as I pushed the paper away. "William and I met by chance. We fell in love. It had nothing to do with James." "I believe you," the headmistress said gently. "But the story is everywhere. The children have been asking questions." "What kind of questions?" "Whether you married Mr. Calloway to get revenge on your ex-husband." I felt physically ill. My private life, my marriage, the one true, pure thing I'd found after years of emotional abuse, was being dragged through the mud. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I need to call William," I managed. In the privacy of an empty classroom, I called my husband. He answered immediately. "I've seen it," he said before I could speak. "It's James's doing. His PR team planted the story. How can they say these things? We didn't even know each other until after my divorce." William's voice was strained. "They're twisting the timeline. They're suggesting we met while you were still married, that you were feeding me information about James's business. That's categorically false. We can prove when we met. We're already releasing a statement. Father's office is handling it." Something in his tone made me pause. "William, there's something you're not telling me." A long silence. Then, "Can you come home? We should talk in person." Cold dread washed over me. "I have a class to teach." "This is important, Liv." I looked at the clock. My students would be arriving in 15 minutes. "I'll come at lunch break." An hour later, I sat in our living room as William paced, his usual composure shattered. He'd loosened his tie, and his hair, normally impeccable, was mussed from running his hands through it repeatedly. "The ethics review has uncovered some irregularities in James's government contracts," he began. "What kind of irregularities?" William stopped pacing. "Evidence of bribery. Falsified safety reports. Corner cutting that put lives at risk." I wasn't entirely surprised. James had always talked about greasing wheels and finding shortcuts. That's serious, I said. But what does it have to do with us? With these ridiculous allegations? William sat beside me, taking my hands. There's more to the story, Liv. Something I should have told you sooner. My stomach dropped. What? I knew who you were when we met at that charity gala. I knew you were James's ex-wife. The words hit me like physical blows. You and you. William nodded, his eyes pleading for understanding. My father's government had been investigating Deckard developments for months. James's name came up in security briefings. When I saw you at the gala, I recognized you from photos. I pulled my hands from his, feeling suddenly cold. So our meeting wasn't chance. You sought me out. No. I mean, yes, I approached you specifically, but not for the reasons you're thinking. Then why? William ran a hand through his hair again. I was curious. The briefings painted James as this ruthless, corrupt businessman. I wondered what kind of woman would marry someone like that. And what did you conclude? My voice was brittle. That you were nothing like I expected. That you were genuine, passionate about education, completely uninterested in wealth or status. His eyes found mine. That I wanted to know you better. But you never told me you knew who I was. I was going to, after our second date. But then you mentioned your divorce, how painful it had been, how you just wanted to move forward. I didn't want to drag you back into that world. So you just lied? For our entire relationship? Not about anything important, William insisted. Not about how I feel about you. I stood up, needing distance between us. If you've been tracking James all along, did you know about his financial troubles? William's hesitation told me everything. Oh my God, I whispered. The ethics review wasn't just about the mud incident, was it? Your father was already planning to go after James's contracts. The investigation predated our relationship, William admitted. But when James humiliated you, it gave us the perfect public justification to accelerate the process. Us? My voice rose. There is no us in this, William. I'm your wife, not a pawn in your father's political games. That's not what I meant. What else haven't you told me? I demanded. What other convenient truths have you been hiding? William's silence spoke volumes. Tell me. He sighed heavily. James's financial situation is worse than the public knows. Much worse. He's been leveraging his government contracts to secure private loans. Without those contracts, his entire business collapses, I finished, the realization dawning. And your father knew this when he demanded the public apology. William nodded. It was a trap. If James apologized sincerely, he'd be admitting wrongdoing, which would justify cancelling the contracts on ethical grounds. If he refused or did it poorly, same result, I said numbly. Either way, he loses everything. He's corrupt, Liv. The evidence is overwhelming. He's been endangering lives to save money. I paced the room, trying to process everything. I'm not defending James. What he did to me, during our marriage and with the mud, was cruel. But this feels orchestrated. And you made me part of it without my knowledge or consent. I'm sorry, William said quietly. I should have told you everything from the beginning. Yes, you should have. I grabbed my coat. I need time to think. Where are you going? Back to school. Unlike some people, I don't abandon my responsibilities when things get complicated. It was a low blow, and William's flint showed it had landed. But I couldn't bring myself to care as I stormed out of our flat. At school, I went through the motions of teaching, my mind elsewhere. Had my entire relationship with William been strategic? Was our love real, or just a convenient cover for his family's political machinations? When school ended, I declined my security details offer to drive me home. I need to walk. Clear my head. We'll follow at a distance, Robert said firmly. This wasn't a request. I walked aimlessly through Notting Hill, barely noticing the boutiques and cafes I passed. My phone buzzed repeatedly, William calling, no doubt, but I ignored it. I needed space to think. As I turned onto a quiet residential street, a black SUV pulled alongside me. The window lowered, revealing a face I hadn't seen in over a year, Christine Deckard, James's sister. Get in, she said. We need to talk. Every instinct told me to keep walking, but something in her expression, urgency mixed with genuine fear, made me pause. About what? About what your husband's family is really doing to James. About what they'll do to you next. I glanced back at my security detail, who had noticed the interaction and were approaching rapidly. Mrs. Calloway, Robert called. Step away from the vehicle. Christine's eyes pleaded with me. They're dismantling his life piece by piece. And you're next once you're no longer useful. Mrs. Calloway. Robert was jogging now, hand inside his jacket where I knew he carried a weapon. I made a split-second decision. 5 minutes, I told Christine. That's all. I got into the SUV before Robert could reach us. As we pulled away, I caught a glimpse of his panicked face as he spoke urgently into his radio. This is kidnapping, I said calmly. You know that, right? Christine snorted. Please. I'm helping you. You're the one who got into my car voluntarily. Where are we going? Somewhere we can talk privately. The SUV wound through London streets, eventually stopping outside a nondescript office building. Christine led me inside and up to an empty conference room. James doesn't know I'm doing this, she said, closing the door. He'd be furious. Doing what, exactly? She placed a USB drive on the table between us. Showing you what the Calloways really are. If this is some elaborate revenge plot. This isn't about revenge, Christine interrupted. It's about survival. Mine. James's. And now yours. She opened her laptop and inserted the drive. What do you know about William's first wife? I stared at her. William's never been married before. Christine's smile was sad. That's what they want everyone to believe. She turned the laptop to face me. On the screen was a marriage certificate, William Edward Calloway and Rebecca Ann Mitchell, dated 5 years ago. This is fake, I said immediately. William would have told me if he'd been married before. Would he? He didn't tell you he knew exactly who you were when you met. My blood ran cold. How do you know about that? Because the Calloways have enemies who watch them very carefully. Just as they watch their enemies. She clicked to another document, divorce papers filed 3 years ago. Rebecca vanished from public record after the divorce. No social media, no credit activity, no address. People go off the grid all the time. Not wealthy socialites with prominent families. Christine showed me a photo of a beautiful blonde woman at a gala, William by her side. Rebecca Mitchell's family owned Mitchell Media Group. They were planning to run a series of exposés on Prime Minister Calloway's ties to certain development projects, including ones that directly competed with James's. My mind raced, trying to process what she was suggesting. Are you saying the Prime Minister arranged his son's marriage to silence Rebecca's family? I'm saying Rebecca filed for divorce, planned to go public with what she knew, and then conveniently disappeared. Christine's voice lowered. Just like you will if you become a liability. This is insane, I whispered, but my certainty was wavering. If any of this were true, it would have come out during the election. The Calloways are very good at managing scandals. Christine pulled up more documents, bank statements, emails, property records. After the divorce, the Mitchell family's media empire collapsed under mysterious regulatory investigations. Sound familiar? It did. Too familiar. Why are you showing me this? Because James isn't the target, Olivia. He never was. Your father-in-law wants to consolidate control of London's development market to funnel contracts to his actual supporters. James was just in the way. And I was what? Collateral damage. Christine's eyes met mine. No. You were the perfect weapon. The sympathetic ex-wife, the humble teacher, now the beloved daughter-in-law publicly humiliated. Who wouldn't support destroying the man who did that to you? My phone buzzed again, William calling. Then a text appeared. Olivia, where are you? Security lost you. Everyone's frantic. Please call me. Another text followed, this one from an unknown number. Check the USB drive I slipped into your coat pocket when you got into the car. Don't let them see it. I glanced up at Christine, who gave no indication she'd sent the message. I need to go, I said, standing up. My security team will be tearing the city apart looking for me. They already know exactly where you are, Christine replied calmly. The tracker in your wedding ring has been active since you put it on. I instinctively touched the platinum band William had placed on my finger. That's not possible. The Callaways don't leave anything to chance. She closed her laptop. The car will take you back. Think about what I've shown you. And be careful who you trust. The ride back was silent. My mind whirled with questions, doubts, fears. When the SUV stopped near my school, my security detail was waiting, faces grim. Mrs. Callaway, Robert said tightly. Are you all right? I'm fine, I said, suddenly exhausted. Take me home, please. William was pacing our living room when I arrived, his face a mask of worry and relief. Liv, he breathed, pulling me into a fierce hug. Thank God. I've been out of my mind. I didn't return the embrace. Were you married before? He froze, then slowly released me. Who have you been talking to? Answer the question, William. His face shifted, the diplomatic mask slipping into place. It was a brief marriage that ended years before I met you. It wasn't relevant. Not relevant. My voice rose. Your ex-wife disappearing isn't relevant? The Mitchell Media Group being systematically destroyed isn't relevant. You've been talking to James, William said, his voice hardening. Or someone close to him. Does it matter? Is it true? William sighed, suddenly looking older. It's complicated, Olivia. You uncomplicate it for me. Rebecca and I were married for 14 months. The divorce was mutual. Her family's company failed because of poor management, not because of any action by my father. And where is Rebecca now? A flicker of something, discomfort? Guilt, crossed his face. I don't know. We haven't spoken since the divorce. I wanted to believe him. Part of me still did. But the doubt had taken root, and I couldn't shake Christine's warning, you'll be next once you're no longer useful. I need some air, I said, turning toward the door. William caught my arm. Olivia, please. Whatever James or his people have told you, it's manipulation. They're desperate. Are they? Or are you? I pulled away. I married you because I loved you, William. I thought you married me for the same reason. I did. His voice cracked with emotion. I do love you, more than anything. Then tell me the truth. All of it. No more convenient omissions. He hesitated, just for a moment. There are things I can't tell you. National security matters. Your ex-wife's whereabouts are a national security matter. William ran a hand through his hair. When you're the Prime Minister's son, everything becomes political. Everything. Including our marriage. I asked quietly. He couldn't hold my gaze. And that was answer enough. I walked to the bedroom and began pulling clothes from the closet, stuffing them haphazardly into a bag. What are you doing? William asked from the doorway. I'm staying at my old flat tonight. I need space to think. You can't just leave. It's not safe. Because of James. I laughed bitterly. Or because of your family. William flinched. That's not fair. None of this is fair, William. I zipped the bag closed. I deserve to know if I'm a wife or a chess piece. As I headed for the door, William made one last attempt. Olivia, if you walk out that door, my father's people will assume the worst. They'll think you've turned against us. I stopped, his words landing like a threat. Is that what you think? No, he said softly. But my father isn't as trusting as I am. I thought of the USB drive in my coat pocket, felt the weight of it like a loaded gun. I'll be back tomorrow, I said. I just need one night to sort through everything. William nodded, defeat in every line of his body. I love you, Liv. That's the one thing that's always been true. I wanted to say it back. The words caught in my throat. Outside, Robert waited by the car. Where to, Mrs. Calloway? My old flat in Notting Hill. He hesitated. I'll need to clear that with. I don't care who you need to clear it with, I snapped. Either take me there or I'll call a cab. 20 minutes later, I stood in my old flat, the place I'd moved to after leaving James, before William entered my life. It was small, dusty from disuse, but blessedly quiet. Alone at last, I pulled the USB drive from my pocket and inserted it into my laptop. The files were encrypted. A text document contained a single line. The password is the date you found James with his assistant. I typed in the date, the day I discovered James's affair with his executive assistant, the final straw that led to our divorce. The drive unlocked, revealing hundreds of files meticulously organized by date. The first folder was labeled Rebecca Mitchell, current location. Inside was a series of surveillance photos, dated just 3 weeks ago. A woman, undeniably the same beautiful blonde from the earlier photo, though now thinner, her hair darker, walked through a small town I didn't recognize. Caption, RM maintained under surveillance at Safe House 7, Malta. My blood turned to ice. Maintained under surveillance. I opened another folder, Olivia Calloway, preliminary assessment. It contained a detailed dossier on me and my teaching history, my financial records, psychological profile based on my social media, even medical records. Most disturbing was a section titled Exploitation Vectors that outlined my vulnerabilities. Subject exhibits strong loyalty to students, rejection sensitivity following emotional abuse in previous marriage, idealism that can be channeled toward political aims. The file was dated 2 weeks before I met William at the charity gala. I opened more folders, my horror growing. There were surveillance reports on James going back years, detailed plans for the systematic dismantling of his company, and, most chillingly, contingency plans for various scenarios involving me. One document, marked Phase 3, Post-Utility Management, outlined procedures for if I became non-compliant or presented security risks. Options included reputation neutralization, offshore relocation, and full disavowal. I was still staring at the screen when my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? I answered warily. Don't react, Christine's voice said quickly. They're listening. Say you're tired and going to bed. I'm actually quite tired, I said loudly. I think I'll get some sleep. Good. Now go to the bathroom, turn on the shower, and leave your phone on the bed. I did as instructed, my heart pounding. In the bathroom with the shower running, I waited. 2 minutes later, there was a soft knock at my window. I nearly screamed before recognizing James's driver on my fire escape. I opened the window. What the hell? No time, he whispered. Christine sent me. You need to come with me now. They know you have the files. Who knows? The Prime Minister's security team. They're on their way. 2 minutes, maybe less. How do I know this isn't a trap? The man looked over his shoulder nervously. Mrs. Calloway, your father-in-law had Rebecca Mitchell committed to a private psychiatric facility in Malta after she threatened to expose his business dealings. She's been there for 3 years. Do you want to wait around to see what he has planned for you? My blood ran cold. I thought of the files I'd just seen, the contingency plans for my management. My phone. Leave it. Bring the USB if you have it. Nothing else. I glanced around my small flat, the home I'd built after leaving one controlling man, before falling for another. Everything I owned, everything I was, seemed suddenly insignificant compared to the danger closing in. I climbed out onto the fire escape. Behind me, I heard the sound of my front door being broken open. The fire escape clanged beneath our feet as I followed James's driver down the metal stairs. My heart hammered against my ribs, adrenaline surging through my system. Move faster, the driver urged, glancing over his shoulder. I heard shouts from inside my flat. Men's voices, authoritative, angry. The security team I'd thought was there to protect me. We reached the alley behind my building. A nondescript grey sedan waited with its engine running. The driver yanked open the back door, practically shoving me inside before racing around to the driver's seat. As we peeled away, I caught a glimpse of dark-suited men bursting from the building's back entrance. One raised what looked like a radio to his lips. Another reached inside his jacket. "Get down," the driver shouted, and I instinctively ducked as we swerved around a corner. "Where are we going?" I asked once we'd put several blocks between us and my flat. "Somewhere safe." He met my eyes briefly in the rearview mirror. "My name is Daniel, by the way. I've worked for Mr. Deckard for 8 years. Why are you helping me?" "Miss Christine's orders. She said to tell you that enemies of enemies are necessary friends." My mind raced, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. William's deception. The files about Rebecca Mitchell. The Prime Minister's security team breaking into my flat. "I need to call William," I said, reaching for my phone before remembering I'd left it behind. Daniel's eyes flicked to the mirror again. "I wouldn't recommend that. Not until we understand his involvement." "He's my husband," I protested weakly, but doubt had already taken root. How much did William know? Was he complicit in his father's schemes, or merely an unwitting participant? We drove for nearly an hour, taking a circuitous route through London before heading west. Eventually, we turned onto a narrow country lane that led to a modest stone cottage surrounded by fields. "Where are we?" I asked as the car stopped. "Berkshire. One of Mr. Deckard's properties that isn't in his name." The front door opened, and Christine emerged, her face tense. "Quickly." Inside. The cottage was rustic but comfortable, a wood-burning stove, overstuffed couches, a kitchen with copper pots hanging from the ceiling. It felt surreal to be standing in this cozy space while my life imploded. "Did anyone follow you?" Christine asked Daniel. "No, I used the counter-surveillance techniques as instructed." She nodded. "Get some rest. We may need to move again soon." Once Daniel had gone to another room, Christine turned to me. "Did you see the files?" I nodded, still processing the enormity of what I discovered. Rebecca Mitchell is being held against her will in Malta. "Yes." After she filed for divorce and threatened to expose Edward Calloway's business dealings, she was diagnosed with paranoid delusions and committed to a private facility. Her family was told she had a nervous breakdown. "And the surveillance on me? The psychological assessment? The exploitation vectors?" Christine's expression was grim. "Edward Calloway doesn't leave anything to chance. When James became a target, everyone connected to him was assessed for potential usefulness. Including his ex-wife," I said bitterly. "Especially his ex-wife. A sympathetic figure with no apparent connection to James's business interests. The perfect weapon." I sank onto a couch, suddenly exhausted. "Why are you helping me? You hardly know me." Christine sat across from me, her usual sharp demeanor softened by fatigue. "I'm helping myself. And James. The Calloways won't stop with destroying his business. They'll destroy him personally, then move on to everyone connected to him. Including me. So this is self-preservation." "Mostly," she admitted. "But also because what they're doing is wrong. To James, to Rebecca, to you." "Where is James?" "In Geneva, trying to secure emergency funding to keep his company afloat. He doesn't know you're here. He doesn't know about the files we recovered." I tried to organize my thoughts, to find some logical path through this nightmare. What exactly do the Calloways want? Why target James's company specifically? Christine poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handing one to me. I took it gratefully, the burn of alcohol a welcome distraction from the cold fear in my veins. Blackwell Estates controls key properties in London that the Prime Minister's actual supporters want access to. Luxury developments, commercial spaces in prime locations. But it's more than that. She took a long sip. 3 of James's major development sites sit on land that's critical for a massive infrastructure project the government plans to announce next year. What kind of infrastructure? A new transportation hub. High-speed rail, expanded underground connections, all feeding into a commercial district that would rival Canary Wharf. The companies positioned to benefit are all major donors to the Prime Minister's party. The pieces clicked into place. So this was never about James splashing me with mud. The mud incident was a gift to them, the perfect public justification for what they were already planning to do. Christine refilled her glass. By this time tomorrow, James will be completely ruined. The government has already frozen his assets pending the ethics investigation. Without those assets as collateral, his loans will be called in. Blackwell Estates will collapse, and the vultures will swoop in to buy the properties for pennies on the pound. I thought of William's face when he told me about the investigation, the mix of satisfaction and regret. Had he known all along what his father was planning? Had our entire relationship been built on this foundation of lies and manipulation? I need to talk to William, I said suddenly. He might not know the full extent of what his father is doing. Christine shook her head. Even if that's true, contacting him now would be dangerous. His phone, his email, his every move is monitored by his father's security team. The same team that just broke into your flat. So what's the plan? Hide in this cottage forever? No. We use what we have. She nodded toward my coat, where the USB drive was still tucked in the pocket. Those files contain evidence of illegal surveillance, corporate espionage, and the wrongful imprisonment of Rebecca Mitchell. If we can get that information to the right people, we can force the Callaways to back off. The right people being. I have contacts at several newspapers. Editors who would love a scandal involving the Prime Minister's family. I thought about the implications. Going public would mean destroying not just Edward Callaway's reputation, but William's as well. My husband, the man I'd fallen in love with, built a life with. I need to think, I said, standing up. Is there somewhere I can lie down? Christine showed me to a small bedroom upstairs. Get some rest. We'll talk more in the morning. Alone in the unfamiliar room, I curled up on the bed fully clothed, my mind racing. The USB drive felt like a bomb in my pocket, one I wasn't sure I wanted to detonate. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because I woke to the sound of urgent voices downstairs. Pale morning light filtered through the curtains. I crept to the door, straining to hear. Raided his Geneva office, Daniel was saying. Interpol, at the request of British authorities. Money laundering charges. That's ridiculous, Christine replied. It's a setup. Mr. Deckard has been detained for questioning. His accounts have been frozen. Damn it. Something crashed, Christine slamming her hand on a table, perhaps. They are moving faster than I expected. I made my way downstairs. Both Christine and Daniel fell silent when they saw me. What's happened? I asked. Christine's face was tight with anger. Your father-in-law has had James arrested in Switzerland. Trumped up charges to keep him contained while they dismantle his company. My stomach dropped. He can do that? Have someone arrested in another country? The Prime Minister has considerable international influence. Especially when the target is a British citizen accused of financial crimes. I sank into a chair, the reality of Edward Callaway's power washing over me anew. If he could reach across borders to have James arrested, what else could he do? What would he do when he found out I had the files? Daniel turned on the television. Every news channel was covering the story, billionaire developer James Deckard arrested in Switzerland. Blackwell Estates shares plummet amid fraud allegations. Government terminates all contracts with Deckard's company. Most disturbing were the stories linking it all back to me, revenge of the Prime Minister's daughter-in-law. Mudpuddle leads to billionaire's downfall. My face was everywhere, portrayed alternately as the innocent victim or the calculating manipulator behind James's destruction. One news segment showed William leaving our London apartment, surrounded by reporters shouting questions. He looked haggard, worried. William Callaway has made no public statement regarding his wife's disappearance, the reporter said. Sources close to the family say Mrs. Callaway left their home after an argument and hasn't been seen since. Disappearance? Had William reported me missing? My question was answered moments later when the screen showed my school, where police officers stood outside talking to my headmistress. The caption read, Police search for missing teacher, Prime Minister's daughter-in-law. "They're looking for you," Christine said unnecessarily. "But not to help you." My phone, left behind at my flat, would show my last known location. How long before they traced Daniel's car? Found this cottage? The wall suddenly seemed to close in around me. "We need to move," I said. "They'll find us here." Christine nodded. "I've been thinking the same thing. Daniel is arranging alternative transportation. Where will we go?" "First, to meet someone who can help us authenticate these files and get them to the media. Then, depending on how things develop, possibly out of the country." "Out of the country?" "Away from my students, my school, my life. Away from William." The thought made my chest ache, despite everything I'd learned. "What about William?" I asked. "What happens to him if we go public with this information?" Christine's eyes hardened. "He chose his side when he married you under false pretenses. When he participated in his father's scheme." "We don't know that for certain," I argued. "He might be a victim in this too. A victim who lives in luxury while Rebecca Mitchell is held captive and your life is destroyed." She shook her head. "Your loyalty is admirable but misplaced." Before I could respond, Daniel rushed into the room. "We need to leave. Now. I just got word that police are searching properties connected to Mr. Deckard within a 50-mile radius of London." "How?" Christine demanded. "This place isn't in his name." "It's in your name," Daniel said grimly. "And they're looking for you too, Ms. Christine." We threw together what few belongings we had and hurried to the car. As Daniel drove us away from the cottage, I looked back at the peaceful stone building nestled among green fields. Just 24 hours ago, I had been a respected teacher, a devoted wife, a woman with a future. Now I was a fugitive, running from the family I'd married into, clutching evidence that could bring down the Prime Minister himself. My thoughts turned to my students. What were they being told about my disappearance? That I'd abandoned them? That I was involved in some sordid scandal? After working so hard to be a consistent, trustworthy presence in their lives, I had vanished without explanation. We drove for hours, taking back roads, changing cars twice at locations Daniel had arranged. By afternoon, we reached a small seaside town on England's eastern coast. "We'll stay here tonight," Christine said as Daniel pulled up to a modest bed and breakfast. "My contact will meet us in the morning. He's bringing documents to help us leave the country if necessary." "Fake passports?" I asked, alarmed. "Alternative documentation," she corrected. "Perfectly legal, just not in our current names." The reality of my situation hit me anew. I was contemplating leaving the country under a false identity, running from my husband, my job, everything I knew. "I need to see what's happening," I said once we were settled in our room. "Do you have a secure way to access the internet?" Christine handed me a laptop. "This is clean. Use the VPN before you search anything." I followed her instructions and began searching for news about William. There were dozens of articles, most speculating about my whereabouts and William's state of mind. One photo showed him leaving 10 Downing Street after a meeting with his father. He looked devastated. A press statement from the Prime Minister's office expressed concern for my safety and urged me to contact authorities. Reading between the lines, it was clear they were painting me as mentally unstable, potentially dangerous to myself. "Were you experiencing any increased stress, Mrs. Calloway?" One of William's quotes read, "I'm worried about her state of mind after the incident with her ex-husband. She seemed unusually paranoid, talking about conspiracies and surveillance. They were setting the stage to discredit anything I might say. If I went public with the files, I'd be dismissed as a troubled woman with delusions. If I was found with Christine and James's associates, it would confirm I was working with my ex-husband all along. A perfect trap." I searched for news about James. The situation was even worse than Christine had described. Blackwell Estate stock had fallen 78% before trading was suspended. Banks had called in loans worth hundreds of millions of pounds. His board of directors had unanimously voted to remove him as CEO. His assets in Britain had been frozen pending investigation. The man who had once splashed me with mud and laughed about it was now facing financial ruin, possibly prison. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. What happens to James now? I asked Christine, who was making calls in rapid-fire Italian on a burner phone. She ended her call with a sigh. Best case? He cuts a deal, gives up his company, keeps some personal assets, and avoids prison. Worst case? He's extradited to Britain, tried for fraud and corruption, and spends the next decade in prison. And all because his company stands in the way of the Prime Minister's development plans. Politics is ruthless, Olivia. Edward Callaway didn't become Prime Minister by playing nice. I thought about William again, his gentle smile when we'd first met, the way he'd listened so intently to my passion for teaching, his tenderness on our wedding night. Had any of it been real? Just after sunset, as Christine stepped outside to take another call, my burner phone rang. The number was blocked. Hello? I answered cautiously. Olivia. William's voice sent a jolt through me. Thank God. How did you get this number? I asked, panic rising. That doesn't matter. What matters is you're safe. Where are you? I can help you. Can you? My voice cracked. Like you helped Rebecca Mitchell. A long silence. Then, quietly, you know about Rebecca. I know she's being held in a facility in Malta against her will. I know your father had her committed when she threatened to expose his business dealings. I know you married me as part of your father's plan to destroy James. That's not true, William said urgently. Not all of it. Rebecca, it's complicated. You uncomplicate it for me, I said, throwing his own words back at him. He sighed heavily. Rebecca did have a breakdown after our divorce. She became paranoid, making wild accusations. My father arranged for her to receive treatment at a private facility. It was for her own good. Do you actually believe that? I asked, incredulous. I did at the time, he admitted. Now I'm not sure what to believe. But Olivia, I swear to you, our marriage was never part of any plan. I fell in love with you. That was real. I wanted to believe him. God help me, despite everything, I still loved him. If that's true, I said carefully, then help me expose what your father is doing. The illegal surveillance, the corporate espionage, Rebecca's situation. Help me make this right. Another long silence. I can't go against my father. Even if what he's doing is wrong. Illegal. It's not that simple. His voice was strained. There are national security implications you don't understand. My father's position, his policies, they're more important than any individual's comfort. Comfort? I repeated, anger flaring. Is that what you call holding a woman captive for 3 years? Destroying a man's company based on false allegations? Sending armed men to break into your wife's flat? Those men were there to protect you, William insisted. You're in danger, Olivia. Not from my father, but from James Deckard. He's using you for revenge. No, William. Your father used me first. Come home, he pleaded. We can work through this together. I love you. Those 3 words, words that had once filled me with joy, now twisted like a knife in my heart. If you love me, I said quietly, prove it. Meet me alone. No security, no surveillance. Just us. Tell me where and when. I hesitated, weighing the risk. Was this a trap? Or my only chance to look William in the eyes and discover the truth? Tomorrow. Noon. The bench by the pond in Richmond Park where you proposed. I'll be there, he promised. Alone. I hung up just as Christine returned. Her sharp eyes took in my expression immediately. Who called? William, I admitted. He found the burner number somehow. Her face paled. We need to leave. Now. If he traced the call. He didn't, I said with more confidence than I felt. And I've arranged to meet him tomorrow. Are you insane? Christine hissed. It's a trap. His father's security team will be waiting to take you into custody. Or worse. I have to see him, I insisted. I have to know if anything between us was real. Christine stared at me, then shook her head in resignation. Love really does make people stupid. Fine. We'll arrange the meeting, but on our terms. With protection. As night fell, I stood at the window watching the dark sea beyond the harbor. Somewhere out there was a world where I might start over, free from the Callaway's influence. But could I really leave everything behind? My students? My life's work? William? The USB drive felt heavy in my pocket. Evidence that could destroy the Prime Minister. Evidence that would reveal William's complicity, even if only through silence. Evidence that might help Rebecca Mitchell regain her freedom. But at what cost? Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake imagining all possible scenarios for my meeting with William. Would he come alone as promised? Would he embrace me, convincing me to return to the life we'd built? Or would he betray me to his father? And if given the chance, could I betray him by releasing the files to the media? Morning brought no clarity, only the grim realization that whatever I decided, someone would get hurt. Whatever path I chose, I would lose something precious. Christine's contact arrived early with documents, money, and a car. The plan was set. I would meet William while Christine's people watched from a distance. If anything seemed suspicious, they would extract me immediately and we would leave the country that night. Last chance to back out, Christine said as we prepared to depart for Richmond Park. Once you're there, you're exposed. I thought of William's face when he'd proposed on that very bench 6 months ago. The hope in his eyes. The future we'd planned together. I have to know, I said simply. Love, Christine muttered, checking her watch. It'll be the death of us all. As our car headed toward London, toward William, toward whatever fate awaited me, I clutched the USB drive like a talisman. It held the truth that might set me free, or the weapon that would destroy everything I loved. Either way, after today, nothing would ever be the same. Richmond Park in spring would normally fill me with peace, the ancient oaks, the wandering deer, the sense of wilderness in the heart of London. But as our car approached the park's perimeter, my stomach twisted with anxiety. The team is already in position, Christine said, checking her phone. 4 people, strategically placed. If Callaway brought security, we'll know before you're in danger. I nodded, throat too dry for words. Remember the extraction signal, she continued. Run your hand through your hair if you feel threatened. We'll create a distraction and get you out immediately. I understand. Christine's eyes softened, the first time I'd seen genuine emotion from her. Be careful, Olivia. Whatever William says, remember what was in those files. People like the Callaways don't change. I thought of William's face the first time he told me he loved me. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. The gentleness of his hands when he held mine. I need to do this alone, I said as the car stopped at a park entrance. Christine nodded reluctantly. We'll be watching. I walked the familiar path toward the pond, autumn leaves crunching beneath my feet. How many times had William and I strolled these grounds, planning our future? I'd felt so safe then, so certain of our love. Now each step felt like walking toward the edge of a cliff, unsure if I'd find solid ground or plummet into darkness. The bench came into view, our bench, where 6 months ago William had knelt with a ring and promises of forever. And there he was, sitting alone, no security detail visible. He looked up as I approached, his face transforming with relief. He stood, taking an instinctive step toward me before stopping himself. Olivia, he said, my name a prayer on his lips. I stayed where I was, several feet away. Safe distance. Are you alone? I asked. Yes. He spread his hands. No security, no surveillance. Just me, as promised. I searched his face for signs of deception but found only exhaustion and worry. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Sit with me, he asked, gesturing to the bench. I hesitated, then joined him, maintaining space between us. The pond stretched before us, ducks gliding peacefully across its surface, oblivious to the human drama unfolding. You look tired, I said, surprising myself with the concern in my voice. I haven't slept since you left. William's hands fidgeted in his lap, as if fighting the urge to reach for mine. Olivia, whatever you believe about my family, about me, I swear I never meant to hurt you. Intentions don't matter much when the outcome is the same, I replied. You lied to me, William. From the very beginning. Not about loving you, he insisted. Never about that. I pulled the USB drive from my pocket, holding it between us. Do you know what's on here? His eyes fixed on it, his expression guarded. Files from my father's security team, I assume. Files that prove your father had Rebecca Mitchell falsely diagnosed and committed to keep her quiet. Files showing I was targeted specifically because of my connection to James. Files outlining how I would be handled if I became a liability. My voice shook. Did you know about all this? William's shoulders sagged. Not at first. I knew my father was investigating James's company. I knew he wanted information about James's personal life. But I didn't know about Rebecca's situation until after we were married. And when you found out? I confronted him, William said quietly. He told me Rebecca was genuinely unwell, that her accusations were paranoid delusions. He showed me psychiatric evaluations. I believed him because I wanted to. And the surveillance on me? The psychological assessment. William winced. I discovered that 3 months into our relationship. By then. He looked at me, raw emotion in his eyes. By then, I was in love with you. I told myself it didn't matter how we'd met, only that we had. How convenient, I said bitterly. It was selfish, he admitted. I should have told you everything. But I was afraid of losing you. So instead you married me under false pretenses. I married you because I love you, William insisted. That part was never a lie. I stared out at the pond, remembering our wedding day. The joy I'd felt. The certainty that I'd finally found someone who valued me for myself. When James splashed me with mud, I said slowly, your father was already planning to target his company, wasn't he? William nodded reluctantly. The investigation had been ongoing for months. But the public humiliation of the Prime Minister's daughter-in-law gave him the perfect justification to accelerate everything. And you let it happen. I didn't know how far he would go, William protested. I thought it would be an ethics review, perhaps some fines. Not this. I pulled out my phone, the burner Christine had given me, and showed him a news headline from that morning. Blackwell Estates declares bankruptcy, CEO remains in Swiss custody. Your father has destroyed him completely, I said. A man's entire life's work, gone. And for what? So his political donors can develop on James's land. Shame colored William's features. It's more complicated than that. Then you uncomplicate it for me, I demanded, for the third time in our relationship. William ran a hand through his hair, glancing around to ensure we were still alone. My father believes the development will revitalize East London, create thousands of jobs. It's not just about enriching his donors. Noble ends don't justify corrupt means, I said. You taught me that, ironically. When you talked about your political philosophy. I still believe that, William insisted. That's why I'm here. To make this right. Hope flickered in my chest despite my better judgment. How? William shifted closer, lowering his voice. I have information, documents proving my father overstepped legal boundaries in the investigation of James's company. Evidence that the ethics violations were largely fabricated. I stared at him, skeptical. Why would you have that? Because I've been collecting it since I learned the truth about Rebecca. His eyes met mine, fierce with determination. I may be my father's son, but I have my own moral compass, Olivia. Why haven't you come forward with it before now? Because I was a coward, he admitted. Because I was raised to believe in loyalty to family above all. Because I feared losing everything, my position, my future, you. And now? Now I've already lost you, he said simply. And nothing else seems to matter as much. I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to. But Christine's warning echoed in my mind, people like the Callaways don't change. How do I know this isn't another manipulation? I asked. A trap to get me to return. William reached slowly into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small flash drive. This contains everything I've gathered. Bank records showing improper transfers to the psychiatrists who diagnosed Rebecca. Communications between my father's office and the regulatory bodies that targeted James's company. Evidence that would stand up in court. I stared at the drive. Why are you giving this to me? Because I trust you to do the right thing with it. Because I love you, and I want to deserve that love. His voice cracked. Because I need to be able to live with myself. I reached for the drive, our fingers brushing as I took it. Even that slight contact sent electricity through me. Despite everything, my body remembered his touch, craved it. What happens now? I asked, suddenly uncertain. That depends on you. William's eyes held mine. If you believe nothing else, believe that I love you. That I want to build a life with you based on truth, not manipulation. Even if it means standing against your father. Even then. I searched his face for any sign of deception but found only vulnerability and hope. The same expression he'd worn when he proposed on this very bench. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Christine, security team approaching from north entrance. Get out now. We need to leave, I said, standing abruptly. Your father's security. I didn't bring them, William said, confusion turning to alarm. I swear. Then how did they find us? I was already backing away, scanning for Christine's team. William's face paled. My father must have had me followed. Olivia, you need to run. Now. Come with me, I said impulsively, extending my hand. He stared at it in shock. What? Come with me, I repeated. Help me expose the truth. All of it. For a moment, he hesitated, and I thought he would refuse. Then he grabbed my hand, his decision made. This way, he said, pulling me toward a less traveled path. There's a maintenance exit most people don't know about. We ran through the trees, the sound of pursuit growing behind us. Adrenaline surged through my veins, making everything sharper, clearer. William's hand in mine felt right, despite everything. We emerged near a small gate in the park's wall. William fumbled with the lock. It's changed, he muttered. The code isn't working. Freeze! Security services, a voice shouted from behind us. William pushed me behind him protectively. Run if you get the chance, he whispered. Find Christine. Use the drives. I'm not leaving you, I insisted. The men in dark suits approached, hands inside their jackets. I recognized Robert among them, my once trusted security chief. Mr. Calloway, Robert said formally. Your father has requested your immediate return. I'm not going anywhere, William replied, standing his ground. And neither is my wife. Robert's expression remained impassive. I'm afraid that's not an option, sir. The Prime Minister has declared this a matter of national security. That's absurd, I interjected. How is this possibly national security? Mrs. Calloway, you're in possession of classified government documents, Robert said. That constitutes a serious offense. William laughed bitterly. Classified because they reveal my father's illegal activities. Robert's jaw tightened. Sir, with all due respect, we have our orders. Then arrest me, William said, stepping forward. But let my wife go. The security team looked uncomfortable. They had clearly not expected William's defiance. We have no authority to arrest anyone, Robert said carefully. We're here to escort you both to 10 Downing Street for a private meeting with the Prime Minister. And if we refuse? I asked. Robert's hand moved slightly toward his weapon. Please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Suddenly, a car horn blared from the street beyond the gate. Christine's driver, Daniel, pulled up in a black SUV, throwing open the passenger door. Now, he shouted. I grabbed William's hand and ran for the gate. Robert moved to intercept us, but William shouldered him aside with unexpected force. Sorry, Robert, he said as we squeezed through the gap in the gate. We dove into the SUV, which peeled away before the door was fully closed. In the rearview mirror, I saw the security team scrambling for their vehicles. They'll be after us immediately, William said, breathing hard. Where are we going? Daniel glanced at me in the mirror. Miss Christine said to take you to the backup location if the extraction was successful. Is that what this was? William asked, a hint of amusement in his voice despite everything. An extraction? What would you call it? I returned, still processing the fact that William had chosen me over his father. The beginning of a very complicated conversation with my father, he said grimly. Daniel drove us through a maze of London streets, taking an elaborate route to shake any pursuit. Eventually, we arrived at an industrial area in East London, pulling into the loading dock of a nondescript warehouse. Christine was waiting inside, her expression darkening when she saw William. What is he doing here? She demanded. I trust him, I said simply. Christine shook her head in disbelief. After everything you've seen? Everything you know. He has evidence against his father, I explained, showing her the flash drive William had given me. He wants to help us expose the truth. Christine studied William with narrowed eyes. Why should I believe you? Why turn against your father now? William met her gaze steadily. Because what he's doing is wrong. Because I love my wife. And because James Deckard, for all his flaws, doesn't deserve what's happening to him. James would be touched, Christine said sarcastically. If he wasn't sitting in a Swiss detention center facing financial ruin. I can help with that, William said. The fraud allegations are based on fabricated evidence. I have the originals and the doctored versions to prove it. Christine's expression shifted from skepticism to cautious interest. That would be useful. I touched William's arm. What about Rebecca? Pain crossed his face. One step at a time. First, we need to ensure our own safety. Your father's security team will be tearing the city apart looking for us, I pointed out. They won't stop, William confirmed. Not when we have evidence that could destroy him politically. Christine checked her watch. My contact at The Guardian is expecting us in an hour. If we go public with both sets of evidence, your father will have no choice but to back down. It won't be that simple, William warned. My father doesn't give up power easily. What's your suggestion, then? Christine asked skeptically. William thought for a moment. We need leverage. Something that would force my father to negotiate rather than attack. Like what? Like proof that he knew about the illegal surveillance and false imprisonment, William said. Proof in his own words. Christine laughed incredulously. And how exactly would we get that? William looked at me, determination hardening his features. We give him what he wants most right now. Me. Absolutely not, I said immediately. You can't turn yourself in. Not turn myself in, William clarified. Meet with him. On my terms. While wearing a recording device. Christine's eyebrows rose. That's not a terrible idea. Except for the part where you'd be walking into the lion's den. My father won't hurt me, William said confidently. I'm his son, his heir. His legacy. He had his daughter-in-law committed to a psychiatric facility, I reminded him. Rebecca wasn't blood, William said, then winced at how callous it sounded. I don't mean that cruelly. I just mean my father operates by a different set of rules when it comes to family. It's too dangerous, I insisted. William took my hands. It's our best chance, Liv. If I get my father on record admitting to even a fraction of what he's done, combined with the evidence we already have, we could force a resignation, Christine finished, warming to the idea. The scandal would be too great to survive politically. I looked between them, fear and hope battling in my chest. And if it goes wrong? It won't, William promised. But if it does, you'll have both drives. You'll have everything you need to expose the truth. I thought of everything that had led to this moment, the mud puddle, the public humiliation, the revelations about William's past, the files revealing the Prime Minister's corruption. A simple act of petty cruelty by James had unraveled a web of power and deception I never could have imagined existed. And now my husband, the man I doubted, feared, and still loved, was willing to risk everything to make it right. How would we even arrange this meeting? I asked, still resistant. I call my father, William said simply. Tell him I want to negotiate your surrender and the return of the files. He won't believe you betray me, I pointed out. He will if I convince him I've come to my senses. That I'm choosing family loyalty over a wife who betrayed me by running to my political enemies. The plan took shape over the next hour. William would contact his father, arrange a private meeting at Chequers, the Prime Minister's country retreat where security would be minimal and recording would be possible. Christine would prepare the evidence for release if anything went wrong. I would. I'm coming with you, I said when William suggested I stay behind. Absolutely not, he and Christine said in unison. I wasn't asking permission, I replied firmly. If you're walking into danger, William, I'm walking with you. It's too risky, he argued. This entire situation exists because other people made decisions about my life without my consent, I said, my voice rising with emotion. I'm done being a pawn. I'm done being protected. I'm done being left behind. William stared at me, a mix of pride and worry in his eyes. You've changed, he said softly. I've grown, I corrected. I'm not the same woman who was splashed with mud and stood there dripping, too shocked to respond. I'm not a victim anymore. Christine cleared her throat. While this is very touching, we have practical matters to discuss. If both of you go, we need a foolproof extraction plan. William hadn't taken his eyes off me. We'll need a signal. Something that would tell your people when to intervene. And we'll need insurance, I added. A way to ensure your father can't simply have us both detained once we're there. Dead man switch, Christine suggested. If you don't check in at regular intervals, everything gets released to the media automatically. William nodded. That might work. As they hammered out details, I stepped away to gather my thoughts. In the quiet corner of the warehouse, I pulled out both USB drives, holding them in my palm. So much power in such small objects. The truth about the Callaways. The truth about Rebecca. The truth about my marriage. William joined me, his expression gentle. Having second thoughts? Trying to understand how we got here, I replied. A week ago, I was teaching year for about the solar system. Now I'm planning to confront the Prime Minister with evidence of corruption. Life changes in an instant, William said. Sometimes it's a puddle of muddy water. Sometimes it's finding out your husband isn't who you thought he was. Are you? I asked, looking up at him. Who I thought you were. William considered the question carefully. Parts of me are. The part that loves you. The part that believes in doing what's right, even when it's difficult. He sighed. But I've also been shaped by my family, by privilege, by the expectation that power matters more than principle. I'm trying to be better than that. Why should I believe you now? After all the lies? You shouldn't, necessarily, he said with surprising candor. Judge me by my actions from this point forward, not my words. I studied his face, the face I'd woken up to every morning for 6 months, the face I'd fallen in love with. There was a new resolve there, a determination I hadn't seen before. I'm still angry with you, I said. I know. And hurt. I know that too. But I still love you, I admitted. God help me. William's eyes softened. Then we have something to fight for. Christine interrupted our moment. It's time to make the call. William took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and dialed his father's number. Hello, father, he said, his voice suddenly cold and formal. We need to talk about Olivia and the files she's stolen. As he spoke, fabricating a story of betrayal and redemption, I watched him transform into someone I barely recognized, the politician's son, the calculating power player. It was a chilling reminder of how easily he could wear different masks. But when he hung up and turned back to me, the mask fell away, revealing the man I'd married, worried, determined, and very much in love. It's done, he said. We meet him tomorrow at noon. And if this works? I asked. What then? William smiled sadly. Then we rebuild. Everything. My father's government will fall. James's company may or may not be salvageable. My relationship with my family will be severed forever. He took my hands. But us? If you'll have me, we start again. Honestly this time. In that moment, standing in a dusty warehouse surrounded by uncertainty and danger, I made my choice. I would walk into Checkers beside my husband. I would face the Prime Minister and demand justice for Rebecca, for James, for myself. I would no longer be the woman splashed with mud. I would be the woman who fought back. Together, then, I said, squeezing William's hands. No more secrets. No more secrets, he agreed. Checkers stood before us, a 16th-century manor house turned Prime Minister's country retreat. Its red brick facade and Tudor architecture might have seemed charming under different circumstances. Today, it looked like a fortress. Are you ready? William asked as our car approached the security checkpoint. I touched the small recording device concealed beneath my blouse, disguised as a medical monitor. As ready as I'll ever be. The security team waved us through with minimal inspection. Edward Calloway's specific instructions, William had told me. The Prime Minister wanted this meeting kept quiet, off the official record. If only he knew we intended to put it very much on the record. Christine's team was positioned nearby, monitoring our transmissions. The dead man's switch was active. If we didn't enter a code on our phones every 30 minutes, the files would automatically release to major news outlets worldwide. Our insurance policy. As we walked up the gravel driveway, William took my hand. Remember, my father is a master manipulator. Don't let him get into your head. I've had practice with manipulative men, I replied, thinking of James. I won't be fooled again. The heavy wooden door opened before we could knock. A stone-faced security officer led us through the grand entrance hall, past priceless artwork and historical artifacts, to a wood-paneled study at the back of the house. Edward Calloway stood with his back to us, gazing out at the manicured gardens through leaded glass windows. Even from behind, power emanated from him like a physical force, the set of his shoulders, the perfect tailoring of his suit, the absolute stillness of someone accustomed to being waited upon. William, he said without turning. And Olivia. How good of you both to come. When he finally faced us, I was struck by how much William resembled his father, the same strong jawline, the same intelligent eyes. But where William's gaze held warmth, Edward's was calculating, assessing. Father, William acknowledged with a slight nod. Sit, please. Edward gestured to a seating area near the fireplace. Tea? This isn't a social call, William said tersely. Edward smiled thinly. Manners cost nothing, even in difficult circumstances. He poured himself tea from a silver service. I understand you have something that belongs to me. The files, I said. Edward's eyes settled on me, cold and appraising. Among other things. My son, for instance. You've led him quite astray. I think he's exactly where he needs to be, I replied, holding his gaze. Bold, Edward remarked. I can see why William was drawn to you. Spirited, principled, qualities I might admire under different circumstances. Spare us the false compliments, William cut in. We're here to negotiate. Edward took a seat in a leather armchair, gesturing again for us to sit opposite him. This time we complied, perching on the edge of an antique sofa. Very well, Edward said, setting down his teacup with a deliberate clink. Let's negotiate. You have stolen classified government files. You've been consorting with known associates of James Deckard, a man under investigation for serious financial crimes. You've both violated numerous laws. He spread his hands. What exactly do you think your negotiating position is? Rebecca Mitchell, William said simply. The name hung in the air between us. A flicker of something, or surprise? Concern crossed Edward's face before his political mask returned. What about her? We know she's being held against her will in Malta, I said. We have proof you had her falsely diagnosed to silence her. Edward sighed, as if dealing with tiresome children. Rebecca suffered a psychological break after her divorce. She became paranoid, delusional. She needed help. She needed silencing, William corrected. Because she discovered your illegal business dealings. She discovered nothing, Edward snapped, the first crack in his composure. She fabricated wild conspiracy theories because she couldn't accept that her marriage had failed. Like these conspiracy theories? William pulled out his phone, tapping the screen before placing it on the coffee table between us. A recording played, Edward's voice, unmistakable, discussing the manipulation of government contracts with someone identified only as the minister. Edward's face hardened. "Where did you get that?" "I've been collecting evidence for months," William said quietly. "Ever since I learned the truth about Rebecca. You would betray your own family." Edward's voice was dangerously soft. "You betrayed me first," William replied. "When you used my marriage as part of your scheme. When you lied to me about Rebecca." Edward leaned back, studying his son with new eyes. "I underestimated you." "Everyone does," William said. "It's been useful." The Prime Minister's gaze shifted to me. "And you, Olivia? The devoted teacher. The humble wife. Was that all an act too?" "No," I said firmly. "Unlike you, some of us are exactly who we appear to be." Edward smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Let's be practical about this. What do you want?" William and I exchanged glances. This was the moment we'd prepared for. Rebecca's immediate release, William began. All charges against James Decker dropped, his assets unfrozen, and a public statement acknowledging the investigation was flawed. "Impossible," Edward scoffed. "We're not finished," I continued. "A full independent inquiry into your government's handling of development contracts. And your resignation." Edward actually laughed. "My resignation? You can't be serious." "Perfectly serious," William said, his voice steady. "You can resign citing health concerns or personal reasons, save some dignity. Or we release everything." Edward's amusement vanished. "You would destroy this family's legacy. Everything generations of Callaways have built." "You've already destroyed it," William replied. "With corruption, with lies, with abuse of power." "Don't lecture me about power," Edward said coldly. "You've lived your entire life benefiting from mine." "I'm aware of my privilege," William acknowledged. "I'm trying to use it responsibly now." Edward stood abruptly, pacing to the fireplace. "This is absurd. Even if I wanted to meet these demands, which I don't, it's not that simple. There are procedures, protocols." "Make it simple," I said. "You're the Prime Minister." Edward turned to face us, his expression calculating once more. "And if I refuse? If I have you both detained right now for theft of government documents?" William held up his phone. "Dead man switch. If we don't enter a code every 30 minutes, everything gets released automatically. And Christine Deckard has backup copies of everything." "So this is blackmail," Edward said quietly. "This is justice," I corrected. "Something you seem to have forgotten about." A tense silence fell over the room. Edward studied us, weighing options, calculating risks the way he'd no doubt done throughout his political career. "There may be a compromise," he said finally. "One that satisfies your primary concerns while preserving certain, essential structures." "We're listening," William said cautiously. "Rebecca can be released. I'll have her transferred to a London facility today, discharged by the end of the week. The charges against James can be reviewed, most likely dropped for lack of evidence. His personal assets can be unfrozen." "And your resignation?" I pressed. Edward's jaw tightened. "Out of the question. However, I could announce I won't seek another term. A graceful exit in 18 months. William shook his head. "Not good enough. Too much damage can be done in 18 months. "Then what do you suggest?" Edward snapped. "That I destroy decades of public service over one mistake." "One mistake?" I echoed incredulously. "You had a woman falsely imprisoned for 3 years. You fabricated evidence to destroy a man's company. You conducted illegal surveillance on British citizens. These aren't mistakes, they're crimes." Edward's eyes narrowed. "You have no idea what it takes to govern, to make the hard choices for the greater good." "The greater good doesn't justify evil means," William said. "You taught me that once, before power corrupted you." Something flickered in Edward's eyes, a glimpse of the father William once admired, perhaps. "William," he said, his voice softer. "Son, Think about what you're doing. Think about your future, your place in this family. I am thinking about my future, William replied. A future I can face with integrity, with a woman I love. Edward looked between us, his expression hardening once more. And if I simply have security take your phones now? Destroy this so-called dead man switch. You'd have to find all the phones, I said calmly, revealing my own device. And explain why you detained the Prime Minister's son and his wife without cause. The media is already watching, William added. Our disappearance would raise immediate questions. Edward's mouth twisted in frustration. He wasn't accustomed to being outmaneuvered. 1 week, he said finally. I announce health concerns, step down in 1 week. But the full investigation into government contracts is off the table. William and I exchanged glances again. The inquiry happens, William insisted. But it can be framed as your initiative, a final act of governmental transparency. Edward considered this, the political animal in him clearly calculating how to spin such a move to his advantage. It could work, he admitted reluctantly. I could position it as my legacy, rooting out corruption wherever it exists, even if it means investigating my own administration. So we have a deal? I asked. Almost, Edward said. One final condition. The files. All copies. Destroyed once my resignation is announced and Rebecca is released. How do we know you'll keep your word? I challenged. Edward looked at me with something almost like respect. You don't. But William knows that a Calloway's word, once given in these circumstances, is binding. William nodded slightly. He's right about that, at least. The family has its own code. I wasn't entirely convinced, but William's certainty was reassuring. We'll need everything in writing, I said. Sign today. Impossible, Edward began, but William cut him off. Not impossible. Just inconvenient. Your private secretary can draw up the documents now. Edward stared at his son, reassessing him yet again. You've become quite the strategist, William. I might be proud if you weren't using those skills against me. I learned from the master, William replied with no trace of warmth. Edward reached for a phone on his desk. Margaret, come to the study. Bring Chambers from legal. We have documents to prepare. As the Prime Minister arranged for the agreements to be drafted, William squeezed my hand. We had done it, outmaneuvered one of the most powerful men in Britain. But something felt off. Edward had conceded too easily, pivoted too smoothly from resistance to cooperation. I don't trust this, I whispered to William. Nor do I, he murmured back. Stay alert. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of legal documents, precise language, and careful negotiation. Edward's team drafted agreements covering Rebecca's release, the dropping of charges against James, the unfreezing of assets, and the Prime Minister's resignation. Every detail was scrutinized, every loophole identified and closed. By late afternoon, the documents were ready. Edward signed them with a flourish, then handed the pen to William. Your turn, he said. Though I'm still not clear on what guarantees I have that you'll destroy the files as promised. My word, William said simply, signing his name. The word of a Calloway. Edward's mouth twitched. Touché. I signed last, my teacher's signature looking oddly ordinary next to the bold strokes of the Calloway men. It's done, then, Edward said, gathering the papers. Copies for everyone. I'll make the health announcement tomorrow morning, setting the stage for my resignation next week. And Rebecca? I pressed. The order for her release has already been sent, Edward assured us. She'll be in London by tomorrow evening. William stood, extending his hand to me. Then we're finished here. As we turned to leave, Edward spoke again. William. A moment alone. William hesitated, then nodded to me. I'll meet you outside. I didn't like it, but I understood, there were things father and son needed to say to each other without witnesses. I stepped out into the hallway, closing the study door behind me. The security officer who had escorted us in stood nearby, his expression neutral. This way, Mrs. Calloway, he said, gesturing toward a different corridor than the one we'd entered through. I'll wait for my husband here, I replied firmly. I'm afraid that's not possible, he said, his tone hardening slightly. Security protocols. Something was wrong. I touched the recording device under my blouse, ensuring it was still transmitting. I'm not leaving without William, I insisted. The officer moved closer. Please don't make this difficult, Mrs. Calloway. I backed away, reaching for my phone to text Christine. But before I could, the study door opened. William emerged, followed by Edward. It's all right, William said, seeing my distress. We're leaving together. Relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. The security officer hadn't backed down. Instead, 3 more had appeared at the end of the hallway. I'm afraid there's been a change of plans, Edward said smoothly. You'll both be staying at Checkers tonight. For your own protection, of course. We had an agreement, William said coldly. And I'll honor it, Edward assured him. Rebecca will be released. James's charges will be dropped. I'll resign. But the timeline, that requires some adjustment. You're detaining us, I said, anger replacing fear. Hosting you, Edward corrected. Until certain matters are resolved. Your phones, please. The dead man switch. He knew about it. Somehow, he knew. No, William said, stepping in front of me protectively. I was afraid you'd be difficult, Edward sighed. He nodded to the security officers. Take their phones. Escort them to the East Wing. Gently, please. They are family, after all. The officers advanced. William's hand found mine, squeezing once, our signal. Whatever happened next, we faced it together. But before the officers could reach us, a commotion erupted at the main entrance. Shouts, the sound of breaking glass, then running footsteps. Sir! A breathless aide appeared. There's been a breach. Media at the gates. Dozens of reporters. Edward's face darkened. How? Who authorized? It's on all channels, sir, the aide continued. BBC, Sky News, everyone. They're reporting on Rebecca Mitchell's illegal detention. They have documents, photographs from the Malta facility. My eyes met William's in shock. We hadn't released anything yet. How? Christine, William whispered. She must have had her own dead man switch. Edward's phone rang. Then another line. Then every phone in the vicinity seemed to explode with notifications, calls, alerts. Sir, the security chief approached rapidly. The opposition leader is giving a press conference. She's calling for your immediate resignation and a criminal investigation. Edward's face had gone ashen. He turned to us, fury and disbelief battling in his expression. What have you done? Nothing, William said truthfully. This isn't our doing. Another aide rushed in. Sir, James Deckard has been released. He's giving a statement from Geneva, corroborated by Interpol officials. Claims of evidence falsification, political persecution. The chaos intensified. Security personnel were receiving urgent communications. Staff members rushed through the halls. Outside, we could hear the distant sound of helicopter rotors, news crews, no doubt. Edward stood frozen, watching his carefully constructed world collapse around him. Then, with the instincts of a lifelong politician, he straightened his tie and turned to his chief of staff. Prepare a statement. I'll address the nation within the hour. Yes, sir. The man hurried away. Edward turned back to us, his expression unreadable. It seems events have overtaken our agreement. So it would appear, William said cautiously. You're free to go, Edward said, his voice oddly formal. Though I imagine the media at the gates would be quite interested in speaking with you. We'll manage, I said. As we turned to leave, Edward called after us once more. William. My husband paused, looking back at his father. Was any of it real? Edward asked, sudden vulnerability breaking through his political mask. Your loyalty to me? To this family. William's face softened slightly. Yes. All of it. That's why this hurt so much. Something passed between father and son in that moment, an acknowledgement, perhaps, that some bonds remain even when broken. We walked out of Checkers into the fading afternoon light, past frantic staff members and security officers too preoccupied to stop us. At the main gate, a crowd of journalists surged forward, cameras flashing, questions shouted from every direction. Mrs. Calloway, did the Prime Minister hold you against your will? William, are you behind the documents released about Rebecca Mitchell? Is it true the Prime Minister orchestrated false charges against James Deckard? William pulled me close, shielding me as best he could. No comment at this time, he said firmly, guiding me toward a car that had appeared at the edge of the crowd. Christine sat inside, a satisfied smile on her face. Perfect timing, William remarked as we climbed in. I thought so, she replied. Though I didn't expect quite this much media. The Rebecca story hit a nerve. You released the files, I said. Without telling us. Christine shrugged unapologetically. Insurance. When your check-in was 10 minutes late, I assumed the worst. We were in negotiations, William explained. The timing was perfect, Christine interrupted. Your father was never going to honor that agreement. He was playing for time, trying to find the backup files, planning to contain you both. I knew she was right. The security officers, the change of plans, Edward had never intended to let us leave with the evidence intact. What happens now? I asked as we pulled away from Checkers, the media chaos receding behind us. Now, Christine said with grim satisfaction, Edward Calloway's political career ends not with a graceful resignation, but with disgrace. The full investigation he feared will happen, but without his ability to control it. And James returns to London to rebuild what he can of his company. And Rebecca? I pressed. Already on a plane to London, Christine confirmed. My contacts in Malta moved quickly once the story broke. She'll need support, counseling. 3 years in that place. She trailed off, shaking her head. We'll help her, William said firmly. Whatever she needs. I studied my husband's profile as he gazed out the window, watching the English countryside roll by. He had stood against his father, risked everything for what was right. The man I'd fallen in love with was real after all. What about us? I asked quietly. Where do we go from here? William turned to me, taking my hand. Anywhere you want. Back to teaching, if that's what you love. Away from London, if you prefer. I'm not bound to my father's world anymore. And you? I asked. What will you do? A small smile touched his lips. I was thinking of writing a book. Ethics in Government, a critical examination. What do you think? I laughed despite everything, the first genuine laugh in what felt like weeks. I think you'd be excellent at that. As our car headed toward London, toward an uncertain but hopeful future, I thought about the chain of events that had led us here. A puddle of muddy water. A moment of petty cruelty from a man who thought I was powerless. A cascade of revelations that had toppled a government. James had splashed me to humiliate me, unaware I'd married into a family with the power to destroy him. But in the end, that same family's corruption had been their own undoing. James would rebuild his company. Edward would face justice. William and I would start again, on foundations of truth this time. And I would return to my classroom, to my students who had missed their teacher. I would tell them, in terms they could understand, that standing up for what's right matters, even when, especially when, it's difficult. That night, as William and I watched Edward Calloway announce his immediate resignation on national television, his political career in tatters, I felt no triumph, only relief. The truth had finally come to light. Was it worth it? I asked William as the broadcast ended. Losing your family, your position, your inheritance. He turned to me, his eyes clear and certain. To find my integrity again? To be worthy of your love? Yes, Olivia. It was worth everything. I leaned against him, exhausted but at peace for the first time in days. We had survived the storm. We had found our way back to each other. And somewhere in the process, I had discovered my own strength, a strength that no amount of muddy water could wash away. 3 months after Edward Calloway's resignation, I stood outside my classroom, listening to the familiar chaos of 28 children settling in for the day. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. "Good morning, everyone." 28 little faces turned to me, lighting up with excitement. "Mrs. Calloway," they chorused, several bouncing in their seats. It was my first day back after a leave of absence that had stretched longer than I'd planned. The media scrutiny, the parliamentary inquiries, the endless questions, it had been too much to subject my students to. But now, with the dust finally settling, I had returned to the place where I'd always felt most myself. "I've missed you all terribly," I said, moving to my desk. "And I want to hear everything I've missed. But first, I have a special visitor today." On cue, William appeared in the doorway, causing a ripple of whispers among the children. They knew who he was, of course. Everyone did. "Class, this is my husband, William." "Is he really the Prime Minister's son?" little Amir stage whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. William smiled gently. "I am. But more importantly, I'm Mrs. Calloway's husband, and I've heard so much about all of you." "Did your dad really go to jail?" another child asked bluntly. I tensed, but William handled it with grace. "My father made some mistakes, and now he's facing the consequences. That's what happens when we don't follow the rules, no matter who we are." The children nodded solemnly, processing this simple explanation of a complex situation. "Mr. Calloway is here because we believe in honesty and transparency," I explained. "We wanted you to have a chance to ask questions about what you might have heard on the news or from your parents." What followed was 30 minutes of the most direct, occasionally uncomfortable, but ultimately healing conversation I could have imagined. Children have an uncanny ability to ask the questions adults dance around. "Were you scared when the bad men tried to keep you at the Prime Minister's house? Does your father-in-law hate you now? Is it true you helped catch the bad guys like a spy?" William and I answered as honestly as we could, in age-appropriate ways. By the end, the children seemed satisfied, and we transitioned to their space projects, which had continued in my absence. As William prepared to leave, he leaned down to kiss my cheek. "They're amazing, Liv. Just like their teacher." After school, we walked home together through the park, enjoying the spring sunshine. Our new flat was smaller than the one we'd shared during our marriage's first chapter, but it was ours, chosen together, paid for with William's personal savings rather than his family's money. "Rebecca called today," William said as we strolled. "She's doing better. The therapist says her progress is remarkable." Rebecca Mitchell's recovery had become something of a personal mission for us both. After 3 years of being medicated against her will, told her memories were delusions, and cut off from everyone she loved, she had emerged surprisingly resilient. But the healing process was slow and painful. "Did she mention the foundation?" I asked. William nodded. "She's interested. Wants to be on the board." The foundation had been my idea, an organization dedicated to supporting victims of power abuse and psychological manipulation. Rebecca would bring first-hand experience, while William contributed his insider knowledge of political machinations. I would oversee educational initiatives, teaching people to recognize and resist manipulation. "That's wonderful," I said. "And James?" "Any word?" William's expression tightened slightly. James Deckard remained a complicated figure in our lives. His company had survived, though diminished. The government contracts had been lost, likely permanently, but he'd managed to retain his core real estate holdings. "His lawyers say he's willing to meet," William said, "to discuss collaboration on the development projects." After Edward's disgrace, the new government had still wanted to proceed with the East London transportation hub, but ethically, transparently, with fair competition for contracts. Ironically, James's company had the most relevant experience, while William had the political connections to help navigate the new landscape. "Are you ready to face him?" I asked gently. The mud puddle incident felt like a lifetime ago, yet it had changed all our lives irrevocably. William considered this. "I think so. Especially if you're with me." I squeezed his hand. "Always." Our relationship had been rebuilt from the ground up over these past months. Every lie exposed, every secret revealed, every hurt acknowledged. It hadn't been easy. There had been nights of tears, days of doubt, moments when the weight of betrayal felt too heavy to bear. But there had also been profound honesty, genuine remorse, and the kind of growth that only comes from confronting one's deepest flaws. William was not the same man who had approached me at that charity gala with ulterior motives. I was not the same woman who had stood dripping with mud, too shocked to respond. We had changed. Grown. Become better versions of ourselves. At home, I checked my emails while William prepared dinner, a domestic skill he'd developed with surprising enthusiasm since our new beginning. Christine sent the quarterly reports. I called to him. Blackwell Estates is stabilizing. Good, William replied from the kitchen. James may be difficult, but he doesn't deserve financial ruin. The investigation into Edward Callaway's administration had confirmed what we'd already known. James's company had been targeted not for ethical violations but because it stood in the way of corrupt development deals. The new government had acknowledged this publicly, helping restore James's business reputation. Do you ever regret it? I asked as we sat down to eat. Standing against your father? William considered the question carefully, as he always did. I regret that it was necessary. I regret not seeing who he truly was sooner. He met my eyes. But I will never regret choosing truth. Choosing you. After dinner, we sat on our small balcony overlooking the city lights. London had changed for us. Once a playground of privilege for William, a workplace for me, it had become something else, a battlefield where we'd fought for justice, a testing ground for our commitment to each other. I spoke with my mother today, William said quietly. I turned to him in surprise. Margaret Callaway had retreated from public life after her husband's disgrace, refusing all contact with the son she viewed as a traitor to the family. What did she say? Not much, he admitted. But she agreed to meet next week. It's progress. I leaned against him, offering silent support. William had lost so much, his family, his inheritance, his place in society's highest echelons. Yet he never complained, never expressed regret. I have news too, I said after a comfortable silence. William raised an eyebrow. Good news, I hope. The headmistress offered me the deputy head position today. Starting next term. His face broke into a genuine smile. Liv, that's wonderful. Did you accept? I said I needed to discuss it with my husband, I replied. It would mean more responsibility, longer hours sometimes. But it's what you've worked for, William said immediately. Of course you should take it. There's something else to consider, I said, my heart racing slightly. Something that might complicate the timing. William looked puzzled, then his eyes widened as understanding dawned. Are you? I nodded, joy bubbling up inside me. 8 weeks. I confirmed it yesterday. William pulled me into his arms, his eyes shining with tears. A baby? We're having a baby. We're having a baby, I confirmed, laughing as he lifted me from my chair, spinning me gently. When? How? I mean, I know how, but... February, I said, placing his hand on my still flat stomach. And I'm guessing it happened around the time we were reconciling after everything. William's expression grew serious. Are you happy about this? With everything still settling. Incredibly happy, I assured him. Life doesn't wait for perfect timing. I think we've learned that lesson thoroughly. Later that night, as William slept beside me, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. From a muddy sidewalk to the brink of national scandal. From doubt and betrayal to deeper, true love. From being pawns in someone else's game to creating our own destiny. The next morning, I had one more piece of unfinished business to address. James Deckard's office was in a gleaming tower overlooking the Thames, smaller than his previous headquarters, but still impressive. His secretary recognized me immediately, her eyes widening. Mrs. Callaway. Do you have an appointment? No, I admitted. But I think Mr. Deckard will want to see me. She disappeared into the inner office, returning moments later. He'll see you now. James stood as I entered, his expression guarded. He'd lost weight, and new lines marked his face. The crisis had aged him. Olivia, he said formally. This is unexpected. I won't take much of your time, I said, remaining standing. I came to say something that's long overdue. James gestured to a chair, but I shook my head. When you splashed me with mud that day, you thought I was still the woman you could bully and belittle. You thought there would be no consequences because I had no power. I met his eyes directly. You were wrong about me. But what happened afterward was wrong too. James's jaw tightened. Your father-in-law nearly destroyed me. Yes, I acknowledged. And that was never my intention. I didn't want revenge, James. I just wanted respect. Why are you here? He asked bluntly. I took a deep breath. To tell you I forgive you. For the mud. For our marriage. For all of it. He stared at me, clearly thrown by this unexpected declaration. Why would you forgive me? Because holding on to anger hurts me more than it hurts you. Because we've all suffered enough. Because moving forward requires leaving the past behind. James was silent for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he laughed, a short, genuine sound of amazement. You know, I never really saw you during our marriage, he said. Not the real you. I see you now, though. I see you too, James, I replied. Not just the arrogant billionaire who splashed me, but the man who rebuilt from the ashes, who survived what would have destroyed many others. Something passed between us, not forgiveness, exactly, but understanding. Recognition of how far we'd both come from that rainy afternoon. William mentioned a meeting about the East London development, I said, changing the subject. James nodded. Yes. I'm considering it. You should. It's a chance to build something positive from all this chaos. As I turned to leave, James called after me. Olivia? Thank you. For coming today. I nodded once, then walked out of his office and his life, this time on my terms. That evening, William and I hosted a small dinner party, our first since the scandal. Rebecca was there, looking healthier than when we'd first seen her after her release. Christine came too, her sharp edges softened slightly by recent events. My headmistress rounded out the group. As we sat around our modest dining table, sharing food and stories, I felt a profound sense of peace. These people had been through fire with us, emerged transformed but intact. A toast, William proposed, raising his glass. To truth. To justice. To second chances. To mud puddles, I added with a smile, and where they can lead. We clinked glasses, laughing at the absurdity and wonder of it all. Later, as our guests departed, Rebecca hugged me tightly. When I was in that place, she whispered, I never thought I'd be free again. You gave me back my life. You fought too, I reminded her. Your strength through those 3 years, that's the real miracle. After everyone had gone, William and I stood on our balcony again, his arms wrapped around me from behind, his hands resting protectively over the tiny life growing inside me. Happy? He asked softly. I leaned back against him, considering the question. 6 months ago, I'd been standing on a London street, covered in dirty water, humiliated and angry. That moment, that small, cruel act, had set in motion events that revealed corruption, freed an innocent woman, toppled a powerful man, and ultimately led me to a deeper love and understanding than I'd ever thought possible. Profoundly, I answered, turning in his arms to face him. Not despite everything we've been through, but because of it. William's eyes, so like his father's in shape, so different in the compassion they held, searched mine. No more secrets between us. Ever. No more secrets, I agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss. As spring turned to summer and summer to autumn, my body changed with the seasons. My students watched in fascination as their deputy headmistress grew rounder, asking endless questions about the baby. William threw himself into preparations, painting the nursery, researching childcare philosophies, attending every doctor's appointment. Rebecca's therapy progressed, and she began dating again, cautiously, with our supportive encouragement. Christine expanded her business interests, occasionally seeking William's advice on navigating the new political landscape. James focused on rebuilding his company, and while we weren't friends, we had reached a state of respectful coexistence. Edward Calloway pleaded guilty to multiple charges of corruption and abuse of power, receiving a suspended sentence due to his age and health. William visited him once, a tense meeting that ended without reconciliation but opened the possibility of future healing. Margaret Calloway gradually renewed contact with her son, eventually coming to dinner at our flat, awkwardly but sincerely congratulating us on the pregnancy. Life moved forward, as it always does. The scandal faded from headlines. New political dramas replaced ours. London continued its eternal process of destruction and renewal, old buildings making way for new visions. In February, on a crisp winter morning with snow falling gently outside the hospital windows, our daughter was born. William cried as he held her, this tiny embodiment of new beginnings. "Hello, Eleanor," he whispered to her. "You come from a complicated family, but you are so deeply loved." Eleanor Margaret Calloway, named for my grandmother and, in an olive branch neither of us had expected to extend, William's mother, had her father's thoughtful eyes and what promised to be my stubborn chin. She was perfect. As William placed her in my arms, I thought about the story we would tell her someday. Not the tabloid version, not the political analysis, but the true story about how a moment of cruelty led to revelation, how lies gave way to deeper truth, how love could be lost and found again. "What are you thinking?" William asked, perched beside us on the hospital bed. "That our daughter is going to have an extraordinary story to tell about how her parents found each other. Twice." William smiled, touching Eleanor's tiny hand with wonder. "It's a good story." "The best," I agreed. "And we're just getting to the good part." Outside, London continued its bustling pace. Somewhere, a car might have splashed a pedestrian with muddy water. Somewhere, powerful people might be making secret plans. Somewhere, a scandal might be brewing. But here, in this quiet room, with my husband and daughter, I had found something rare and precious: truth, love, and the peace that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what truly matters. "I love you," William said, as if reading my thoughts. "Both of you. More than I ever thought possible." "We love you too," I replied, speaking for myself and our daughter. "Always." And in that moment, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, and there would be many, we would face them together, stronger for having been broken, wiser for having been fooled, and more grateful for having nearly lost everything that mattered. That's the thing about mud puddles, my friends. Sometimes they're just dirty water that ruins your day. And sometimes they're the beginning of the most important journey of your life. Thank you for taking this journey with me. If my story has touched you in any way, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had a moment that seemed terrible at the time but led to unexpected blessings? How have you found strength through difficult circumstances? Your stories inspire me, as I hope mine has inspired you. Please subscribe if you'd like to hear more from me. This chapter may be ending, but new stories are always waiting to be told.